Look up at the night sky. What do you see? You see stars, countless stars. Each one is a sun, perhaps with its own family of planets. We are living on one of these planets, a small blue world called Earth. It is teeming with life. From the smallest microbe to the largest whale, life is everywhere. But it wasn't always this way. There was a time when our planet was a barren rock, completely empty of life. This raises one of the biggest questions we can ask. How did it all begin? How did a lifeless planet become a vibrant, living world? This is the story of our deepest roots, a journey that takes us back to the very beginning of everything. The question of our origins is a mystery that has captivated thinkers for centuries. It's a question that connects us to the cosmos itself. The atoms in your body, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones were all forged in the hearts of dying stars billions of years ago. We are literally made of stardust. So, when we ask where life came from, we are also asking about our place in the universe. Are we a rare accident? Or is life a common outcome when the conditions are just right? The quest to answer this question is one of the greatest adventures in science, a detective story written in the rocks, the oceans, and the very DNA that makes us who we are. Imagine you are a time traveler. Set your destination for 4.5 billion years ago. You would not recognize our home. There are no blue oceans, no green continents, no white clouds. There is no air to breathe. You would find yourself on a world of fire and rock, a hostile and violent place. This was the early Earth. It was a planet still being formed, bombarded by asteroids and comets left over from the birth of the solar system. The surface was a sea of molten lava, a hellscape where nothing could survive. Yet somehow, from this chaos and violence, the first seeds of life were planted. This journey from a fiery, dead rock to a living, breathing planet is the most epic story ever told. It is a story of transformation, of chemistry becoming biology. It's about how simple, non-living chemicals could organize themselves into something truly special, the first living cell. This was the moment that changed everything. It was the dawn of life on Earth. From that single, humble beginning, an incredible tree of life would grow, branching out into millions of amazing forms. We are just one tiny twig on that vast and ancient tree, and our story begins in a world that was nothing like the one we know today. Let's go back to that early Earth. It was a place of extreme violence. The young sun was weaker than it is today, but the planet was incredibly hot. This heat came from the constant collisions of asteroids and meteorites. It also came from the radioactive decay of elements deep within the planet's core. The surface was a glowing red ocean of magma. Gigantic volcanoes erupted, spewing out gases like water vapor, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen. This formed the Earth's first atmosphere. But it was not an atmosphere you could breathe. It was a toxic cocktail of gases with almost no oxygen. It was a truly alien world. Over millions of years, the Earth began to cool down. The constant bombardment from space slowed. As the planet's surface cooled, a solid crust started to form. It was a dark volcanic rock, but the cooling had another amazing effect. The water vapor that had filled the atmosphere began to condense. It started to rain. And it didn't just rain for a day or a week. It rained for centuries, a relentless downpour that covered the entire planet. This great rain formed the first oceans. These were not the calm blue oceans we know. They were hot, acidic, and filled with dissolved minerals, especially iron, which made them look greenish. This young world was now a water world, but it was still a dangerous place. Without a protective ozone layer, the sun's deadly ultraviolet radiation baked the surface of the oceans. The tides were enormous, much bigger than today, because the moon was much closer to Earth. Giant waves would have crashed upon the shores of the first volcanic islands. Lightning storms constantly flashed across the sky. This was the stage. The setting was ready. All the necessary ingredients were there: water, energy from lightning and volcanoes, and a rich soup of chemicals. The cosmic kitchen was open and something amazing was about to be cooked up. So we have a planet with oceans, an atmosphere, and a lot of chemical building blocks. The elements needed for life, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur, were all present. They were in the water, in the atmosphere, and in the rocks. But they were just simple, non-living molecules. The next step in our story is the biggest leap of all. It is the jump from simple chemistry to the complex chemistry of life. How did these random molecules come together to form something that could grow, reproduce, and evolve? The answer might be found in a warm little pond, or perhaps deep beneath the waves. How do you get life from non-life? This is the core of the mystery. In the 1920s, scientists Alexander Oparin and JBS Haldane had an idea. They imagined the early oceans as a primordial soup. This soup was a rich mixture of simple organic molecules like a broth. They proposed that energy from lightning or the sun's ultraviolet rays could have sparked chemical reactions in the soup. These reactions would have combined simple molecules into more complex ones, like amino acids and nucleotides. These are the building blocks of proteins and DNA, the very molecules of life. This idea was just a theory, but it was a powerful one. It suggested that life could arise naturally from chemistry. In 1952, two scientists named Stanley Miller and Harold Urey decided to test this idea. They set up a famous experiment. They created a closed system of glass flasks and tubes to simulate the conditions of early Earth. They filled it with water to represent the oceans and a mixture of gases, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen to represent the early atmosphere. Then, they sent electric sparks through the gases to simulate lightning. They let the experiment run for just 1 week. When they analyzed the water, they found something incredible. They had created several types of amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. The primordial soup was not just an idea anymore. It could be created in a lab. The Miller-Urey experiment was a landmark. It showed that the building blocks of life could form naturally under the right conditions. Since then, other experiments have produced all sorts of essential organic molecules, including the components of DNA and RNA. But having the building blocks is one thing. Assembling them into a living thing is another. The next crucial step was the formation of a boundary, something to separate the inside from the outside. This is the job of the cell membrane. Scientists have discovered that certain fatty molecules, called lipids, can spontaneously form tiny bubbles or spheres in water. These spheres, called vesicles, could have trapped other molecules inside, creating the first simple protocells. These protocells were not truly alive yet. They were just tiny chemical bubbles. But they were a critical step. Inside these protective membranes, the chemicals of life could become more concentrated. They could react with each other more efficiently. Over countless years, some of these protocells might have developed the ability to pull in energy and materials from their environment. Some might have even developed a way to make copies of themselves, perhaps using a simple molecule like RNA. The first protocell that could grow, metabolize, and reproduce would have been the first living cell. It was the last universal common ancestor, the great-great-great-grandparent of every living thing on Earth today, including you. For about 1 billion years, life remained very simple. The first cells were tiny, single-celled organisms called prokaryotes. They floated in the iron-rich oceans, feeding on the chemical soup around them. They lived in a world with no oxygen. In fact, oxygen was a poison to these early life forms. They were anaerobes, meaning they lived without oxygen. The world belonged to them. They were the masters of the planet. But then, a new kind of microbe evolved, and it was about to change the world forever. It was a revolutionary. This new organism was called cyanobacteria. It had developed a new trick, a superpower that would reshape the entire planet. This superpower was photosynthesis. Cyanobacteria figured out how to use energy from sunlight to make their own food. They took in carbon dioxide and water and used the sun's light to turn them into sugar for energy. It was an incredibly efficient way to live. But this process had a side effect, a waste product. That waste product was oxygen. For the first time, large amounts of free oxygen began to be released into the oceans. At first, this oxygen didn't build up in the atmosphere. It reacted with the iron dissolved in the seawater, causing it to rust. This iron oxide then sank to the ocean floor, forming massive layers of banded iron formations that we can still see in rocks today. This process went on for hundreds of millions of years. The oceans were literally rusting. Eventually, most of the iron in the oceans was used up. The oxygen produced by the cyanobacteria had nowhere else to go, so it started to escape from the oceans and build up in the atmosphere. This event is called the Great Oxidation Event. It was one of the most important and also one of the most catastrophic events in the history of life. For the old anaerobic life forms, this new oxygen-rich atmosphere was toxic. It was a global pollution crisis. A great extinction occurred, wiping out many of the species that had dominated the planet. But for life as a whole, this crisis was also an opportunity. The rise of oxygen created new possibilities. Some microbes evolved ways to not only survive in an oxygen world, but to use it. they developed a new, much more efficient way to get energy from food called aerobic respiration. This process releases far more energy than anaerobic methods. This extra energy would fuel the evolution of bigger and more complex life forms. The oxygen also formed the ozone layer high in the atmosphere. This layer shielded the Earth's surface from the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation, making it safe for life to one day leave the oceans and conquer the land. The cyanobacteria, in poisoning their world, had paved the way for ours. With a new energy-rich atmosphere, the stage was set for another great leap in evolution. Life became more complex. A new type of cell appeared, the eukaryotic cell. These cells were much larger and more organized than the simple prokaryotes. They had a nucleus to protect their DNA and other specialized compartments called organelles to perform different jobs. This complexity may have arisen when one simple cell engulfed another, forming a cooperative relationship called endosymbiosis. The mitochondria in our own cells, which act as our power plants, are thought to be the descendants of ancient bacteria. This new complex cell was the key to building larger multicellular organisms. For billions of years, life had been microscopic. But around 600 million years ago, something amazing started to happen. Cells began to stick together and cooperate, forming the first multicellular animals. The first ones were simple, soft-bodied creatures, like sponges and strange fern-like organisms known as the Ediacaran biota. They were the first experiments in animal life. But then, about 540 million years ago, evolution seemed to hit the accelerator. In a relatively short period of geologic time, a stunning diversity of new animal forms appeared in the oceans. This event is called the Cambrian explosion. It was life's creative frenzy. During the Cambrian explosion, almost all the major animal body plans that exist today came into being. Animals with shells, skeletons, legs, and complex eyes appeared for the first time. Creatures like the trilobites with their hard exoskeletons scuttled across the sea floor. Fierce predators like Anomalocaris with its large, grasping claws hunted in the waters above. It was an evolutionary arms race with new defenses leading to new weapons, and vice versa. This incredible burst of diversity created the first complex ecosystems, with predators and prey and intricate food webs. The oceans were no longer just a microbial soup, they were a jungle teeming with strange and wonderful animals. From the Cambrian seas, life continued to evolve and diversify. Fish developed jaws and then backbones. They became the dominant predators of the oceans, but the land was still an empty frontier. Around 475 million years ago, the first plants, probably related to modern mosses, began to colonize the damp edges of the continents. They were followed by the first land animals, like insects and scorpion-like arthropods. Then some lobe-finned fish developed lungs and sturdy fins that could be used like legs. They crawled out of the water, becoming the first amphibians. This was a monumental step, a true invasion. Life was conquering a whole new world. Once life was on land, it took off. Plants evolved into massive forests, changing the climate and creating new habitats. Amphibians gave rise to reptiles who developed waterproof skin and eggs that could be laid on land, freeing them from the water completely. For millions of years, reptiles dominated the Earth, leading to the age of the dinosaurs. After a massive asteroid impact wiped out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, a new group of animals got their chance. They were small, furry creatures that had lived in the shadows of the dinosaurs. They were the mammals. With the giants gone, mammals diversified, filling every corner of the planet. Among the mammals, a group of primates evolved in the trees. They developed forward-facing eyes for depth perception and grasping hands for climbing. Over millions of years, some of these primates came down from the trees and began to walk on two legs. This freed their hands to carry food and make tools. Their brains began to grow larger. This was the beginning of the human lineage. After a long evolutionary journey through many hominid species, our own species, Homo sapiens, finally appeared in Africa around 300,000 years ago. We were not the strongest or the fastest animals, but we had something special, a large creative brain. This brain allowed us to develop language, art, agriculture, and science. We built civilizations. We learned to understand the laws of nature. We looked up at the moon and the stars, the same moon that caused massive tides on the early Earth, and we decided to go there. We built rockets that carried us away from our home planet, allowing us to look back at the small blue marble where this whole incredible story unfolded. From stardust to thinking beings, from a single cell in a primordial ocean to a species that can contemplate its own existence and the vastness of the cosmos. What a journey it has been, and the story is not over. The origin of life remains one of science's most profound and challenging questions. Did life begin in a warm little pond as Darwin imagined? Or in the fiery depths of hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor? Or did the building blocks of life arrive on Earth from space, carried here by comets and asteroids, a theory known as panspermia? We don't have all the answers yet, but the search for them is what drives us forward. It reminds us that life is precious and rare, a beautiful accident or a cosmic imperative. The story of our origins connects every one of us to each other and to the universe itself. So keep looking up and keep asking the big questions. The cosmos is waiting.